joining with Raki and drinking and having fun, but okay, COVID changed the plans. So we have the honor to have today with us Dr. Gareth Owens. He's the Erasmus coordinator for the Hellenic Mediterranean University, but he's well known in the area of Minoan language and the Cretan hieroglyphic, that he has given talks on TEDx, on National Geographic, on the National Research Foundation. He's a world expert in Minoan disc, and he told me that I must mention that he was born in the same hospital like Mick Jagger, so this will give us an insight most probably on his speak. And I will give the floor now to Gareth, and I will share also the screen. So, Gareth.
Thank you, Vangeli. Kalispera. Can you hear me? Somebody can hear me?
Yeah,
yes, okay, thank you. Right, thank you for the feedback. Kalispera ke kalosiothates to Minoan Crete. Good evening and welcome to Minoan Crete. It was a great pleasure to be invited to speak to you for the social event, especially by Vangelis and his team, whom I have sitting next to me because as an archaeologist, I have only just come out of the Stone Age. But I have the Pasiphae Lab on hand to help me with any technological matters. Actually, I wanted to treat them to pizza after we finished the talk tonight, but they ordered the pizzas before I got here. So we've had our pizzas already. So I suppose I have to work for my lunch, my dinner now. Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet everybody, and your conference looks interesting. What I will try to do is to share a few thoughts with you about Minoan Crete, since unfortunately you are not with us, but I hope that you might be with us next year. We will see. But in spite of that, what I'm going to be talking about will be the mythology and the history of Minoan Crete, and I keep my fingers crossed that maybe we can take you there. Vangelis said I was born in the same hospital as Mick Jagger, which is my only claim to fame. I was also born in the same year and studied the same subjects as Boris Johnson, but I hope the similarity stops there. Actually, Boris was speaking in Glasgow, I saw on the BBC, and I'm in Crete, so I don't wish to change positions with him. I'm quite happy where I am at the moment. I came to Crete for 6 months, 33 years ago, and I stayed a little bit longer. So I must thank people for putting up with me so long. I did my PhD on the Minoan language, and now I'm working on the Festos disc, which is the enigma of Minoan Crete, we might say. And there is actually a connection at the end with Mick Jagger, so I hope that you will stay with us. I'll start off with a video that expresses how I feel about teamworking, networking, and yourselves, and I'll try and play the video without blowing up Vangelis' computer.
Whether it's education or whether it's research, the challenge is what makes this different means to get there, and that combination of different means will actually bring a better result. We feel it's important to join the industrial world with the educational world as well, so that our students are heading towards something not just theoretical. They're actually going out into the real world, and they will be ready for it. international collaboration is vital for the universities, because your education is not just your home university. It's not just even your home country. It's not even your home language. There's a big wide world out there that we can all learn from and we can all contribute to.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That sums up in less than 2 minutes how I feel about international collaboration. The European Union made a number of videos, 7, I think, concerning European collaboration in programs, and they chose our university to host one of them. I've been working here for 27 years at the former TEI, which many of you know as. We developed into the Hellenic Mediterranean University, and now we are part of the Athena network. Now, Athena was the goddess in Athens of wisdom and strategy. Now, what I'm going to share with you for Minoan mythology is approximately 1,000 years before classical Athens. But just before we do, just to start with a couple of words, because history has words and words have history. And by taking a little bit of time to think about things, I think things become clearer sometimes. For example, our institute evolved into the Hellenic Mediterranean University. We have taken as the motto of our university, Pandas Anthropi Tuidene Oregonde Physi. All humans by nature desire knowledge. Now, this is truer now more than ever. And these are the first words in the book of Aristotle, Metaphysics. But it's interesting that the book is called Metaphysics, his philosophy, because it didn't actually have a title. When they were compiling his book, it was the one in the list after the book about physics. So if the previous book had been about gymnastics and exercise, philosophy would be called metagymnastics or something like that. So sometimes it's a matter of choice how we can define things. But Meta, I heard recently that Facebook is changing its name to Metaverse or to something. I have been reliably informed that the word meta in Hebrew is a bit close to she has died, which is a bit scary. I will tell you later about Minoan religion based around the great mother goddess, who is very much alive and with us. And just to give you an idea of why words are important and how words travel, I was thinking of the very well-known word astronaut, which is a sailor, naftikos, nautis. It's a sailor going to the astra. Well, the astra is actually the stars. We can't go to the stars because it's too hot. The Russians refer to people as cosmonaut. Well, that's a much better word because cosmos is the universe. The question of terminology is always very important. And what is interesting is the Chinese people who go into space are actually called taikongnaut. They've made up a word which is half Chinese and half ancient Greek, which I found very interesting. The way that languages travel as people travel. Before I go into Minoan Crete, I'll play a trailer for you for our research on the Festos disc that we presented at the National Research Foundation in Athens before we go into Minoan Crete itself. I will try with a little bit of help from my friends. Thank you. Right, that is how we presented our work. Thank you, Vangelis. That's how we presented our work in Athens. If we now open the DVD, please, if you could be kind enough. Now I'm going to go into Minoan Crete with you to share the Crete. We'll have the English version, I think, today. We can actually turn the sound off, I think. It's at the bottom. Sorry. I'll turn the sound off in a second. We're going to it. Oh, sorry. It's behind there. Can you move up? Thank you. Right, now I'm going to take you into the history of Crete, because we have 4,000 years of written history, but 10,000 years of civilization. And Crete, the island of Crete that we refer to as Megalonissos, is the great island of Crete. We are strategically located between Europe, Asia, and Africa. We are where 3 continents meet. We are where 3 tectonic plates meet, which is why we have a lot of earthquakes, especially this summer. Our international students have been experiencing it. We are now, what I'm showing you here in just 1 minute are pictures of 10,000 years of civilization, 4,000 years of written history, which is my interest, before we go into have a look at the mythology. Now, mythology is my favorite subject. I don't hide that because it's about people. But what I find interesting in mythology is that mythology is history before people start writing. Before people are writing, they're telling stories. When people come together, whether it was us sharing our pizza now, or when we're working in the lab, people tell stories to try to explain things that they don't understand. And I have found that in mythology, there is truth. There is some truth. Whether we will understand all of the truth, who knows? But we understand a lot more about each other and ourselves when we actually discuss it with each other. And I like to think that people were telling stories, and these stories started off with the natural world, which is also where science originated from. And as someone said to me recently, I was particularly thinking about it with the quote from Aristotle, but also we live in a globalized world. You people are specialists in defined networks and network function, particularly with the pandemic that we cannot be with each other in person now. We now need international collaboration more than ever. Nobody has the answers. We have to work together as a team. And it is a pleasure for me to be in the Pasiphae Lab of our university, because they first designed my website 12 years ago. Many of the postgraduate students and doctoral students waving at me here were still probably in school 12 years ago when we did that. So I've seen how people can benefit and progress by helping each other do things. The mythology, we will have a look at science before people start writing. I think mythology is also the origins of science. People looked up into the skies, into the stars, and started telling stories. And some of you are actually electrical engineers, I believe. Now, the word electricity, electron, comes from the ancient Greek word for amber, the beautiful stone from the Baltic Sea that we all know they get dinosaur DNA from there in Jurassic Park. And at the end of the talk, we'll try and do something like Jurassic Park with the Festos disc if we can. Let's have a look at mythology first. Well, mythology on Crete, where we are between different continents, starts off with the father of the gods, Zeus, who takes Europa, whether she wanted it or not. Europa, who was a princess in the East, he kidnapped her, he raped her, he took her away from Asia. They came to Crete, Europa, and everywhere we see Zeus depicted as a bull, a very powerful creature, but also the bull is connected also in mythology. We know Hercules was trying to capture the bull of Crete, and the bull sometimes is also connected with earthquakes, which is relevant to us here. He brought Europa to Crete. They then had 3 children, King Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon, who were the kings of Minoan civilization. King Minos was at Knossos. His brother Rhadamanthus was at my favorite palace with the nicest coffee, Festos, down in the south, near my village, and Sarpedon was at Mallia. Now, King Minos was the god in the underworld. He would decide what would happen to people. These were the children of Zeus, who were the kings of the island of Crete. This is mythological, what we're looking at back in the past. But King Minos had a problem because he fell foul of the gods. And we do know that he used to go to the top of the mountain in Crete every 9 years to receive the laws written on stone from his father, God. Well, this always reminds me of the story of Moses and the 10 Commandments. But that should remind us that where we are in Crete is very much part of the Middle East. What I like about living on Crete is that we are in Europe just. I feel as if I have 1 foot in Europe and 1 foot in the Middle East. Cretan civilization, the Minoan civilization, to be understood. Have a look at Greek civilization now, but also consider another ancient civilization like ancient Egypt. If we triangulate, we can understand. So the people of Crete were closely related to these countries. They were connected to all of these places. So King Minos got into trouble with the gods because he was supposed to sacrifice a bull. He changed his mind, which is not a good idea because the gods are something like the mafia. If you mess with the family, they will get you. And they made his wife, Pasiphae, whom this laboratory that I am now sitting in was named after. Pasiphae, they made her fall in love with the bull and want to have relations with him. In old translations of the Bible in England, they would say she wanted to get to know the bull. I think they might have been considering doing Erasmus personally. But Pasiphae wanted to get to know the bull, and the result was the Minotaur, the bull of King Minos. Well, it's not actually the son of Minos, it's the punishment of Minos. He's not allowed to kill him. And the bull was actually put into the labyrinth, which we all know labyrinths now, which actually comes from the word for double axe, which I hope next year or in a couple of years, I might be able to take you around Heraklion Archaeological Museum, and I will show you the objects there. Now, Pasiphae's name is very interesting, as is the laboratory where I'm sitting now. It's not, as one very bright postdoctoral student here said, Pasiphae means we eat everything. That was close. That was a good attempt, but we were eating pizza at the time, so he's allowed to be a little bit off the mark. Pasiphae actually means she who shines everywhere, the very bright one. And Zeus, the god, is often connected with the sun. And Europa, after whom our continent is named, and the 2 euro coin has Zeus on it. Europa means the wide face, and it is a synonym for the moon. So Zeus kidnapping Europa is actually the sun taking the moon. It's an eclipse that we are looking at. In Greek mythology, it is the origins of science. But Pasiphae had the Minotaur. He was put in the labyrinth, which was built by Daedalus. Now, Daedalus was the Minoan Leonardo da Vinci. He invented most things. I actually wanted to name our university the Daedalic University after Daedalus here, but my elders and betters objected to my idea. I think it was a good idea because Daedalus was the craftsman and we are very technologically based, but not exclusively. Daedalus was the craftsman from Athens who invented what can only be described as a cow outfit for Pasiphae, the very bright one, to get to know the bull. And the bull, the Minotaur, was born as the punishment of King Minos for not respecting the gods and was put in the labyrinth. And then according to stories, the people from Athens would have to come to dance on the bull, to dance, and we think it's probably a reference to the Minoan sport that you can see here. They are jumping over the bull. Now, this is not like in Spain where the toreadors kill the bull. my Portuguese students have told me that there is something actually like this in Portugal now, which is bull acrobatics, where they jump over the bull without actually killing the animal. But the Theseus, the hero we'll meet in a moment from Athens, came to Crete to kill the bull. But let's have a word about Daedalus before we do so. Daedalus is well known for inventing many things, and he was the first person to fly. Unfortunately, his son Icarus was the first person to crash. Now, I, for my sins, took out Greek citizenship and I had to do my military service. I was in the army in Crete. I met the head of the Greek armed forces and they said, Owens, you know mythology. Tell us about Icarus, because the Greek school for pilots, the Top Gun school of Greece, is called the School of Icarus. And they said, Icarus was the first person to fly. I said, unfortunately, he was the first person to crash. It would have been better to call the school of Daedalus, but we should always read stories until the end. As we know, Icarus crashed because he flew too high to the sun, which melted the wax in his wings, and then he drowned in the sea. Now, I'm not going to tell you that the Minoans could fly, because Vangelis hasn't offered me raki here tonight. We're on something soft. But we think this might be a metaphor for people traveling very fast, maybe a very fast ship. And so Daedalus has built the labyrinth, but the hero Theseus is coming from Athens to kill the Minotaur. Well, I make no secret of the fact that I don't like Theseus because he doesn't treat people nicely. Theseus was the son of the king of Athens, who decided to come and kill the Minotaur because the people in Athens were paying tribute to Crete, because Crete was dominating Athens at that time. So he comes over here with 7 boys and 7 girls. They're dancing on the ship on the way over. They start doing the bull sports. They start helping each other. Can I? It's stuck for a second. Can I get it, please? It's okay. I want that to disappear, please. Thank you. Sorry. Maybe I touched something by mistake.
You want to stop the...
No. I just want the picture of the Minotaur to disappear, please. Ah, a picture. Yep. Thank you. Right. They were doing the bull's balls. All technological problems are my responsibility. Right. Thank you to my colleagues. They were doing the bull sports, but Theseus had come here to kill the Minotaur. Now, the Minotaur is actually the half brother of the princess Ariadne. They both have the same father. The same mother, sorry, Pasiphae. Now, Ariadne, who the French named their spaceship after, the Ariane, Ariadne is the princess, and her name in ancient Greek would mean Ariadne, the very pure one. She is the virgin goddess, whom we will come across later. She says to Theseus, I will help you, because like all good stories, the goddess, they make her fall in love with him. And he says, will you help me kill the Minotaur, your half brother? Yes. Will you help me destroy the palace of Knossos that belongs to your father? Yes. Then will you help me take over Minoan Crete, and Athens will be in charge? And she says, yes, because I love you, but you will make me your queen, won't you? And he, not a very nice person, lied and said, yes, he would. So he managed to kill the Minotaur with the ball of string that we know defined your way out of the labyrinth. And then they sailed away to the island of Naxos. When Ariadne woke up in the morning, she had sacrificed everything for Theseus, who was not a nice piece of work, and he sailed away and left her behind. Now, we know that this was probably not a mistake, because when he left Athens, his father, Aegeus, said to him, my son, I am sad you will die on Crete with the Minotaur. Your ship has a black sail. If you are alive when you come back, please change the sail to white. Well, Theseus conveniently forgot to change the sail in the same way that he forgot to take Ariadne with him, and he acquired all the power in Athens. His father committed suicide from Sunium by diving into the sea. His father was called Aegeus, which is why the Aegean Sea is named after the father of Theseus, who committed suicide. Why Aegean Airlines named their airline after Theseus's father, I'm not quite sure sometimes. I offered to write this story in their in-flight magazine. For some reason, they turned me down. I can't imagine why. Anyway, Theseus is with Ariadne. Here she is helping him, and here he abandons her on the island of Naxos because Athena tells him to leave her behind. Very convenient. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, but she is from Athens, of course. Well, Ariadne wakes up. She has been abandoned. And who comes along to save her? Dionysus. Surprisingly, Dionysus, the god of wine, is actually very nice. He takes pity on Ariadne, puts her up into the stars and turns her into a constellation. We have a connection with astronomy again. And Dionysus' name means the wine of Zeus. We used to think that he was a god that came into Greece after the period of Knossos, but a few years ago in archaeological excavations in Hania, in West Crete, they found an inscription talking about Dionysos, the wine of Zeus. And that inscription is 1300 BC, 100 years before the Trojan War. So what I like about living on Crete is expect the unexpected. New things come to light every year, and our database for the Minoan inscriptions gets bigger every year, which is something particularly pleasing because it means we have to re-challenge any ideas that we think we have, which I think also applies to any science, whether it's your software-defined networks or network function virtualization, you're always looking for better solutions. And those solutions, in my opinion, come about as a result of teamwork, people from different countries, philosophies, languages, interdisciplinary way of working, and by listening to each other. It's very easy to talk. It's not so easy to listen. But I often say to the students, it's really, really good to listen to people. And like we have with the lovely guys and the ladies in the lab here, to socialize with each other. So even online, I'm grateful to be your social event. Glaucus, myth. Myths are what we have before we have writing. They are telling stories. Mythologia means the telling of a story. Mythos is also a very nice cold beer in Greece in the summer. I can recommend it, especially if we are sitting telling stories with each other. But in these stories, we see the origins of science, we see people communicating, and we see people explaining things in a way that they can. And we have the story of Glaucus, where the glaucoma comes from. He is a boy who fell into a large jar of honey and drowned. And the doctor, someone brought him back to life. Well, I'm not going to tell you that they could bring people back to life, but we do know that there is evidence for doctors in Knossos. 1,000 years, sorry, in Festos, not in Knossos, in the south of Crete. 1,000 years before the Acropolis in Athens, they had doctors working on Crete already. Right, just a couple of more things before we get into the history. The king of Crete a bit later on. The king of Crete a bit later on was known as Idomeneus, which means the power of Mount Ida, Psiloriti, the big mountain of Crete, which when, not if, when you come to visit us in person, we will show you the beautiful island. He was the king of the Cretans who went to the Trojan War. Now, quite often we have the name Minos comes up a lot. And one theory, which is very good, it's not mine, I wish it was, is that Minos was not the name of a king, but probably a title. Something like Pharaoh would be a good way of doing it. But we have the Trojan horse, how to get into Troy. I don't know if I should talk about Trojan horses when I'm in a network security lab, but I'm sure they can deal with it. They went to get Helen of Troy back. Well, Helen was supposed to be the most beautiful woman in the world, but the Greeks sent more than 1,000 ships. The latest boring archaeological theory is that the Trojan War is really about economics. They were trying to control the sea trade and the trade between the Aegean and the Black Sea. But we know in our civilized world that people don't actually go to war for oil or money or anything like that. So I'm sure that theory doesn't count. I'm a romantic at heart, so I think if you're in love with someone, send 1,000 ships to bring them back. It's probably better for the world. And the last the last object I will finish off before we go to history is King Minos was given as a gift by the god Zeus, a number of gifts. One of them was a robot that walks around the island. Talos is not a shopping center, as my children seem to think it is. Talos the robot, and as my Czech students say to me, robot is a Czech word, because in the lesson I do with them for Greek, I always say, that's a Greek word, that's a Greek word, that's a Greek word. And when I mention robot, they always shout at me, Gareth, that's a Czech word, because they are proud of it. But this was a robot that represents the power of Knossos, the power of Minoan Crete, the power of the Bronze Age, which is what we're going to go into now. This DVD, which is all the history of Crete, which we have a lot of, was produced for the Olympic Games 2004 in Greece, nearly 20 years ago now. And we'll go into Knossos, which I sincerely hope I will have the pleasure of guiding you in the not too far future. My Erasmus students, some of you are following the talk, we're going there next Wednesday, 12 o'clock midday, followed by a picnic. Anyone else from the IEEE NFV-SDN Conference who can get to Knossos by 12 o'clock on Wednesday, you're very welcome to join us. I think Miguel is going to tell me off for teasing people in a moment. Right, this is the Palace of Knossos, where I will take you to with pictures and tell you some stories from there. The Minoan civilization, 1,000 years before classical Athens. If you've been to Athens, if you've seen the Acropolis, 1,000 years before that, we are on Minoan Crete. And what I particularly like about Minoan Crete is that it is where mythology meets history. We have history because we have writing. I'm going to finish up with that at the end and with the Festos disc. But we also have stories, we have pictures, we're trying to understand what's going on. Festos is near Heraklion, which is where this conference should have been taking place under better conditions, but I have a suggestion at the end to make. These are helmets that soldiers were wearing there, and these helmets are from a little bit before the time of the Trojan War. So the fighters at the Trojan War would have been wearing helmets like this. The good news is that the Trojan War did take place. It is a historical event. The bad news is that Brad Pitt was not there. So ladies, I'm sorry if you're disappointed. But the good news also is that Peter Jackson, who did Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, I heard he's going to make the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I hope so, because what he does excellently. And if he can make, with special effects from Hollywood, of the best stories ever told, if somebody could get me a job as mythological advisor, I'd give up my job at this university. The rector will have my notice tomorrow if we could do that. These are some objects that were found around Knossos about 1,400 BC. To give you some idea where we are in the world, because I know we have colleagues from Kurt, I think it's in Sweden, America, China, Europe, all over the world on Crete. To give you an idea of where we are, Crete, Minoan Crete that I'm presenting to you now is approximately the same date as Tutankhamun in Egypt, not far away. We had a big earthquake a couple of weeks ago off the east of Crete, and the tsunami reached until Egypt. That happened 2 weeks ago, so it's very easy to see how connected we are. And approximately the same date as Stonehenge in my other island, because in my former life, I was British, supposedly. The centers of Crete. This is the Palace of Knossos that was reconstructed by the British archaeologist, Arthur Evans. The population was something like 25,000, which was huge for that time. And the population of the island was like 100,000 probably, which was big. Crete is a huge island between 3 continents that produces olive oil, food all year round, and we have very good fruit at the moment as well, and wine, of course. But the Palace of Knossos was the main part, the center of Minoan civilization in the second palace period. Why do I say the second palace period? The first people came to Crete at least 15,000 years ago. We now have evidence from the Paleolithic period, before the last ice age, South Crete, near Moniprevoli. They have plakias. They have found objects that are from about 15,000 years ago. After the Ice Age, we have the Mesolithic period. We then have the Neolithic period from 7,000 to 3,000 BC. And then they start using metal. They're using copper. They are mixing copper and tin, which probably the copper comes from Cyprus, and they are mixing it with tin from Afghanistan. So they're trading across Asia to produce bronze, many of the objects that we will see. Crete was a great trading place, but because we are between the continents, they were also great sailors who were able to sail throughout the Mediterranean, and you navigate at night using the stars. And the Palace of Knossos that I show you here is the reconstructed second palace, because all of the first palaces were destroyed by catastrophic earthquakes in about the 17th century BC, probably as a connection of related to the eruption of the volcano Santorini. Santorini is the island due north of us. From Crete to Athens, it's 300 kilometers. Santorini is in the middle, but it's 150 kilometers of open sea. The volcano of Santorini was bigger than Krakatoa. Krakatoa in Indonesia went off 100 years ago, and we know that the sound wave went around the world. From Santorini, ash has been found in Iceland, Greenland, and they believe that the sequoia trees in California stopped growing that year because the ash was thrown up into the air and the sunlight was blocked out. It would have been a world event. The tsunami from Santorini did not destroy Minoan civilization. That's now an old theory that's out of date, which is not a bad thing. It was an excellent theory 50 years ago based on the evidence they have. I'm a keen supporter of people who try. It's easy to criticize. It's difficult to have the guts to stand up and try to be the first to do something. But that's what research is about. But the people of Crete were affected by the tsunami, and probably East Crete. I managed to have a few days holiday in East Crete, and we saw some archaeological sites, on holiday, but we did see some archaeological sites that were affected by the tsunami on the east part of the island. But we think that all of the buildings on the island were destroyed by the earthquake connected with the volcano. And behind the story of the volcano is Atlantis. The volcano of Santorini is the origin of the story of Atlantis, but that's another story. Right, Knossos is the biggest palace. The second biggest is the palace near my village, Festos, where the Festos disc was found. That is about half the size of Knossos, and Festos was excavated by the Italians. Knossos was excavated by the British, not to the exclusion of other people. There's a lot of synergia, collaboration. But if you want a cup of tea, you go to Knossos. If you want a nice coffee, go to Festos. It's where I drink my coffee at the weekends, because the Italians would not work without a proper cappuccino, and they brought a proper cappuccino machine from Italy, and it's now in the cafe at Festos. So I can recommend a coffee with friends there. Festos is half the size of Knossos. Malia on the north coast, where the French excavate, I think they actually just sweep. If you sweep the sand away, you find more rooms. The French archaeologists work here, and then they go swimming in the sea, just over there to wash off the dust. That's 1/3 of the size of Knossos. And down in the east, excavated by the Greek Archaeological Service, is Zakros. Now, there was an earthquake just off the coast of Zakros a couple of weeks ago, and the small tsunami from there did get to Egypt, to give you some idea of how history repeats itself. These are the main palaces. There is something like 100 archaeological sites on Minoan Crete. And it's interesting that in Homer's book, in the Iliad, in the Odyssey, he talks about Crete with 100 cities. The archaeologists have now found about 95 sites, and they're going crazy thinking where the other 5 might be, because we've come to realize that there's a lot of history in the things that we read. Right, that's an introduction to the palaces. Next, I'll actually take you to the buildings, give you some ideas of the reconstructions. Arthur Evans, the British archaeologist, reconstructed the Palace of Knossos. The other sites are not reconstructed. Many archaeologists criticize his work, but that's often by scientists who don't do anything else apart from just criticize other people. To criticize people is easy. To be the first to do something is not. But these are also some artists' reconstructions of what the palace would have looked like. But we can now go and walk up 5 floors and see what's there. A story I only learned recently was that Arthur Evans reconstructed Knossos, and it was all paid for by his father, who was a very rich industrialist in Britain, John Evans. He had factories. And John Evans gave him the money and said, but whatever you do, do it systematically. And Arthur Evans was really one of the first archaeologists. Before him was Heinrich Schliemann in Troy, who was really a treasure hunter. Heinrich Schliemann found Troy by reading Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, but he then just was looking for treasure, what he did. But a story I only heard recently was that Arthur Evans remembers when he was about 10, so about 1860, a good family friend visiting his father and talking for hours. Now, it works out that this family friend was someone we have all heard of, Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, the evolution of species, the origin of species, sorry, the theory of evolution. Charles Darwin was best friends with Arthur Evans' father. Arthur Evans excavated Knossos systematically. I like to think he got his systematic thinking from the way Charles Darwin was thinking 150 years ago. So history repeats itself. And as we always say to students, go back to the original sources and see it from there. Other buildings. Near my village, this is the Ayatriada near Festos, where you can see the Rampa del Mare going down to the sea. In the distance is the Libyan Sea with the islands called the Paximavia. When you are at this archaeological site, you are actually closer to North Africa, Libya, than you are to Athens. And when we have a south wind blowing, a sirocco, my village is near here, the local people actually call it the Gaddafi. And when we have the sand in the air, you can tell it's coming from Africa. We also have Archanes, just after Knossos, which was famous for, is still famous for producing wine. And when they excavated this place, they found archaeological objects 3,500 years ago, that were sealed and stamped with Egyptian hieroglyphics. So these people were exporting something from Archanes to Egypt. They analyzed it and they found out that they were exporting wine 3,500 years ago. Well, the wine is still produced in Archanes, so they clearly know what they're doing. And the wine here was also made in this place, which is Vathi Petrol, which I will show you. This wine press was found actually in situ, actually there. This is a wine press that has been preserved from nearly 4,000 years ago. Vangelis Makakis assures me that when we have the live event on Crete, Cretan wine will be provided. Metal makes the world go round. Their economy, if it's now the dollar, the pound, the euro, the yen, whatever it is, not bitcoins, I think, whatever it is, metal made the world go round. That's what the economy was based on. Remember, please, I told you it was with copper from Cyprus and tin from Afghanistan. And they had an administrative system, including sealstones and writing. This is the old logo of our university before it changed its name and before we started giving PhDs. I wanted to keep the old logo, but I was outvoted again. I think we should have kept it. Right, society. Minoan society is agriculture. These are harvesters. They are farmers. And every weekend I go to my village to get fresh air near Festos. 2 weeks ago, I collected my first oranges. I'll bring some to the lab soon, so the students here get some vitamin C. And we were checking that the olive trees are good as well. The olives are very important for the economy, as it was also in ancient Athens, of course. What else do we know about Minoan society? They got builders. To have builders, you must have architects. And that's one of my students said the other day, you must have slaves. Because if you're in charge, you're not going to do it yourself. You're going to get someone else to do it. People ask me if Minoan society had slaves. My honest answer is probably. Why do I say probably? Because we don't have the evidence for it. But other contemporary societies of that time did have slaves. So I would be surprised if they were different. There's only one actual inscription that talks about the slave of God. Now, what's interesting is my wife is Greek Orthodox. When the children were baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church, I heard the priest describe the children as doulos theou, the slave of the God, when the children were baptized. This is exactly the same words that we have in inscriptions more than 3,000 years ago. So this shows to me that people don't change. And something very important, the role of women. Women are not a minority. I believe there's 51% in the world. Men are a minority. And as we all know, the secret of success is hard work and teamwork. It makes the world go round. Women were very much respected in Minoan society. How do we know that? They're very visible in art. And we have words in ancient writing for king and queen, priest and priestess. And the women are doing jobs. In old theories, Crete was a female-dominated society. I don't think there's any evidence for that. I don't believe in taking the evidence too far. As a male, as a historian, as a teacher, as a member of the human race, I am impressed by the evidence for equality, because we are looking at something 1,000 years before classical Athens, where women were second-class citizens, and where there was a lot of slavery, which enabled classical Athens to do the wonderful things that it did. But the role of women is very interesting in Minoan Crete, especially in religion, but we'll come to that in a moment, because the religion is based around the women. The women of Crete were, and I can say because I've lived here for 30 years, and are well known for their beauty. This is La Parisienne, that when she was excavated, the workmen said, ah, La Parisienne, she is very beautiful. She must be from Paris. Well, I've been to Paris. The women are very beautiful, but they don't look anything like her. In my opinion, this fresco is very, very Mediterranean, especially that eye that you have a look at. But she is probably a priestess or even a goddess. But the picture I'm showing you here is about 1,500 BC, 3,500 years ago. The wonderful thing about Knossos with the frescoes is that it's the multimedia of Minoan Crete. The multimedia of Minoan Crete, we see a lot about what's going on. Right. Art, religion, and writing, and we finished. Thank you for your patience. Right, art. Minoan Crete is very well known for its art, especially things from the sea. Here we have the octopus coming out of a shell. Here we have from the sea, we have the bull, El Toro, and we have 3 periods of art. The beautiful pottery, the Camares ware that is gold and black, that I once said to a conference of physicists from CERN, that I wonder if it is light coming out of the darkness of chaos. And the physicist asked me if I've been reading Stephen Hawking recently. I said, possibly. We're all influenced by what we read. But these style of paintings are usually found in caves, and they used to go to caves for religious reasons. The blue monkeys collecting crocus, the saffron, the beautiful gold bees around a drop of honey, and every drop you see in there is granulation. Every drop of honey, indeed. That's the first palace period before the big earthquake. This is the second period, the beautiful dolphin fresco from the Queen's room, but also the eye is very similar to the eye of La Parisienne as well that we saw. The octopus again from Palais Castro. the octopus, which is a wonderful object for art because the tentacles can go everywhere. The lily prince, those of you who have visited us in Crete or been to Athens, you would have seen this person on the Minoan line ships between Athens and Crete. And this last one I'm going to show you here is a vase decorated in this. This is a branch of an olive tree. So this vase would have had olive oil. We don't eat anything without olive oil, which is probably why I put weight on, I should think, while I've been staying here. And the third period, after the Mycenaean Greeks have taken over, after Theseus has killed the Minotaur and Crete has become part of mainland Greece, we think that that myth, we think that that myth actually represents the, excuse me one second, actually represents the Mycenaean Greeks taking over Minoan Crete about 1400 BC. But the last period of the palace of Knossos, we have the throne of the king of Knossos, who has either side of him the griffin, the mythical creature, eagle, lion, and snake. And it represents the earth, the sky, and the underworld. This represents the power. And if you look very carefully at the back of the throne, that is how mountains are depicted in Minoan art. And usually in Minoan art, you see a goddess on the top of the mountain. So some people have suggested that it was actually a queen who was in charge at Knossos. We don't know. The honest answer is we don't know. Right, the last two sections, religion and writing. Right, religion, the double axe. This here, the word for the double axe on Crete, not in mainland Greece, is labyrinth. It's actually where the word labyrinth comes from. The labyrinth is the place of the double axe. And we know that this was a sacred symbol for the Minoan people. I always see balance when I look at this, something like yin and yang, trying to keep the world in balance. A labyrinth means the place of the double axe, but it became, the stories developed, including Theseus and the Minotaur, and it became where you would get lost. But we know that the religious activities were taking place on the mountain, or they were worshipping these goddesses. These goddesses are the snake goddesses, maybe Ariadne and Pasiphae, whom we refer to, could also be the priestess. These beautiful faience goddesses, about 1/2 meter tall, are made of faience, which is something like glass. The technique comes from Egypt. This is the goddess that they were worshipping. And because their religion is based around the mother goddess of nature, whom I think we have on the Festos disc as well, because they are based around her, people have said that Minoan society was female dominated. Well, there's no evidence for that. With all respect to my Greek Orthodox friends and relatives and my Catholic friends in the Mediterranean, for every picture of Jesus Christ you see 10 of his mother. It's the mother giving life is a very, very important figure indeed. And the last I'll show you in here is the larnax of where somebody was buried. Right, the last section before we get to the Festos disc, writing. Writing, Minoan Crete, the Vangelis told you I did my PhD on these subjects, trying to understand Minoan writing. And I believe we can say that Minoan writing writes the Minoan language, which is an Indo-European language, so connected to many of the languages of people listening to this talk. But I saw that my students from Georgia are in there, so their language is not related to this. That shows the exception. But we are able to read the Minoan language because of the decipherment of Linear B. Now, Linear B was the writing that the Mycenaean Greeks came along, took the Minoan writing and used it for writing their own language. I can write Gareth in Greek letters, but it will never be a Greek name. Gareth was a knight of King Arthur. I am a barbarian and proud of it. And we can also write in other writing systems. Writing and language are two separate things. Any writing, theoretically, can write any language. But Michael Ventris, an English architect, was one of my intellectual heroes. I make no secret of that, who managed to decipher the writing and find the ancient Greek language on here. And he did it in 2 years in his spare time. So I admire his intellectual achievement there. From the work of Michael Ventris in Linear B, which mainly talks about collecting sheep and soldiers fighting, we can actually go to Minoan Linear A, which is what my PhD was about, which I think is more interesting because we have Minoan inscriptions like this. Ignore the 7 at the bottom, that's from the museum in case it gets lost. All the other lines you see on the inscription and the dots are numbers. And if you add up all those numbers, what you see above the 7 at the bottom is actually a total of all the other numbers on the inscription in front of you. We have an example of Minoan mathematics. So the word above the 7 in front of the, I'm pointing at the screen, but that doesn't help. In front of the circle that you see obviously means, it's okay. It disappears if you do that, Gareth, thank you. It obviously means total. By context, we know what it must mean. So there are clues that can help us, but then you have to try to gather evidence to see what it really means. But I'm more interested in non-administrative ones. This is a cup, and the Minoans wrote inside of it. Now, I say to my students when we're talking about this, and when we go to Knossos next week, this cup is from Knossos. What would you write in a cup? Erasmus students usually say cheers, bottoms up, something like that. But we're looking at something here that's 1500 BC. The earliest Greek inscriptions, about 700 BC, are actually erotic poetry, and they're written in cups. Many of them are written in cups. So archaeology, linguistics could potentially be interesting, and we'll see that when we get to the Festos disc. What I did was collect all of the Minoan inscriptions, and I'm particularly interested in religious inscriptions because I think it's very important to understand how people think, which is why the enigma of Minoan Crete, the Festos disc, which I have here that we will finish up with, and then we're just finishing the talk. The Festos disc is the holy grail of Minoan Crete that we are trying to get hold of. I finished my PhD, spent 4 years publishing a book and developing a website, which this lovely laboratory helped me do. And it helped me focus my work. And I spent the last 13, 14 years trying to understand the Festos disc. It's a continuation of my PhD on Minoan linguistics, but it's a sort of postdoctoral project without an examination and without a deadline. And I'm enjoying it. It's a journey on which I am. The Festos disc is, if you like, my labyrinth, my journey to Ithaki, trying to get there to enjoy the journey, because it is the only Minoan inscription which was deliberately baked, put into a fire, into a kiln. All the others were preserved by accident. This is one side of the Festos disc. I actually have the Festos disc with me, but you can't see it. I usually say in, that's okay. I usually say in talks, I borrowed it from the museum and I will return it tomorrow. But a Greek journalist told me not to say that, otherwise I'll end up in a Greek prison one day, which is not an experience I want. But the Festos disc has 2 sides, 242 signs, 61 words in 18 sentences that has rhyming. It is a poem, there's no doubt about that. It has musicality, and in a moment I'll play a lovely young lady, scientist and musician, singing the Festos disc. We got to a position where we were able to read the Festos disc by using the decipherment of Linear B by Michael Ventris, and then we set about trying to understand it. I published the work on my website, set up by Pasiphae Laboratory. Thanks, guys, of Aristopoli. And the latest idea we have for the Festos disc is that it is a poem, it is a song, probably to the goddess of childbirth, Aphaea, and I have 3 theories as to what it might be. It might be for a prayer for a woman when she is giving birth, which is dangerous for the woman. It could be a prayer to conceive a child, or it could be for the woman later in her life, maybe for gynecological problems when she doesn't stop being a woman. There's three different ideas I'm thinking about here. The other idea, the object itself, we know the Minoans were worshipping a solar goddess, and I have three ideas as to what the object actually symbolizes as opposed to what it actually writes. Symbolism is another feeling. Linguistics is trying to understand what's written on it. Maybe it symbolizes the morning and evening star, Venus, Aphrodite, the brightest object in the sky after the moon at night, the Merastri. Maybe it symbolizes the rising and the setting of the sun, which is what I actually think it might be, or it could actually be the sun and the moon. As we see, we're returning to astronomy and other places as well. What we're going to do now is come out of the DVD, please, Vangelis, and if you bear with me, we'll play 2 minutes of the Festos disc. A lovely young exit, thank you. Okay, we're going to play 2 minutes of the Festos disc, and then we're going to finish up with the song. Home. Thank you, guys. They're fantastic the way they work here. Not yet. Not that one yet. Not yet. We're coming back to that. Sorry. No, sorry. Not yet. Mick, wait a second, Mick, please. Thank you.
We are trying.
Yeah. We go my home, please. We can play it from there.
Your home.
Thank you. Right. Oh. The voice of the Festos disc, a charming young lady, Despina Hiotidou from North Greece, a student. She's graduated now. Congratulations, Despina. The history of science, but she's also a musician and does 101 other things as well. I got her to read the Festos disc for me. And she said to me, Gareth, how can I do that when we don't understand it? And I said, I don't understand it either. Try your best. Try from your heart. And Despina is bright and intelligent and lovely. And she did it for me, and we recorded it in a studio. 2 minutes. Please listen to the Festos disc. If you want, close your eyes, have a glass of wine, put your arm around someone you care about, and maybe the Festos disc could be, my theory is maybe it's an erotic poem to the goddess of love. But just listen and enjoy.
Ique pa geriu, etuque auditi, aupi, ique nuatusa, guiditique, guihino, ique deriune, curiate, ique sidate, zesituti, ique ranaka, retue, iguidua zunariu, ioie, ique curia, ique hui terai sui, sana, ique curia, iguidua zunariu, ioie, ique curia, ique huita, rariu hui, deriu hida, curiaque, ique paie, nadate, zuuka, ique hui terai sui, paie, zuuka, ique zotuti, viditite, irai napu. Zodua hui, saeneque, zenariutia. Pazeresa, sotipa ieriu. Zorai hidua, tietute, irianitu, vidua caie, au enete, zetariu, au saie, deteraresa, ipe huie, aunitino, au nopa, auditi, zoaunitino, guapinadua, tiriute, tiditi, tinariue, zoaunitino, pecireriuti, idetenati, aupi nadua diti.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Despina, for reading that to us. We did that in a studio, and people say to me, is that how the Minoans spoke? Well, of course, that's not how the Minoans spoke. They didn't speak syllabically. But if I give you the sound ko, no, and so, it's the word knossos. If I give you pa, I, and to, it's the word for festos. What we have is the skeleton of the language. And what I wanted Despina to do with her beautiful voice and with her good mind there was to say it with feeling. I didn't want the archaeological object to be dead after 3,500 years ago. What I wanted was to have feeling, which I think Despina has done, has given it life again. Someone said that our work is a little bit like a Jurassic Park for Minoan linguistics. I must admit that I like that. Right, if we go back to the original screen, and that was a thank you, Vangeli. That was a collaboration of my university with my colleague in Oxford and with my colleagues up in Kozani in the north of Greece as well. Vangelis, that you?
I wanted to do this because I felt like the only thing.
Later, my friend, thank you. Someone, Vangelis said that someone asked in the picture of La Parisienne whether the Minoans had lipstick. Yes, they did have cosmetics. The Minoan ladies were very well known for beauty and for beauty items, and their style of fashion was very advanced indeed. But remember what I said about Egypt. We're very close to Egypt. And Nefertiti, the mother of Tutankhamun, who was very beautiful indeed, we know from the statues, there's a rumor that she might have been from Crete. Right, we're finishing off there. Thank you for your patience. I've just gone over my time, but I told Vangelis in the car when he kindly drove me up here, he's a very kind colleague, that I was born in the same hospital as Mick Jagger. Thanks, Mum and Dad. That was a good start to life. Not yet. I'll get rid of the advert, thank you, right. But I wanted to finish off with something, Mick Jagger, because I hope that when you come and join us on Crete Live, that what we've done for you is a taster. I would, on behalf of my colleagues here at the university and in the Pasiphae Lab, where we are, the wife of King Minos, I would like to have the pleasure of taking you to the Archaeological Museum, of taking you to Knossos, maybe even a trip to Festos. And in the lockdown and COVID that we've had for the last 2 years, I actually have more time than I've ever had for research. So I can say that Minoan linguistics has progressed during the lockdown because I spent more time at home and I had time to do things. But seriously, I was thinking which song to finish off with because it is a social event. It's now 10 o'clock at night for us, but tomorrow is a local holiday. We don't have to work, so we can listen to music for 5 minutes. I was going to finish off with a song that I like, Everybody's Gotta Learn Sometime by Phil Harrison and the Corgis from 1980, because I like the song, but I met Phil Harrison in Crete. He retired to Crete, this rock musician. I met him in West Crete, but I'm not going to play that. I was also considering playing Queen David Bowie, Under Pressure, because I think that sums up how we've all been for the last 3 semesters. Under pressure, coping with COVID, under pressure, but we keep trying. But what I decided on in the end is the song that we will play for you, and this will be the first song at the next conference live to be held on Crete. I was going to play Zorba the Greek by Mikis Theodorakis to honor Mikis, who died a little while ago, but I'm not going to. I suggest that you have a conference in the future in Hania, where we have our Department of Electronics, and we have an excursion to the beach of Stavros, where Anthony Queen as Zorba the Greek was dancing to Mikis Theodorakis. Until then, thank you for your patience. I hope I haven't tired you too much. I look forward to meeting you on Crete. Mick Jagger, nothing further stones, thank you. Mick Jagger and David Bowie. No, Paul McCartney, bye-bye.
What?
Oh, thank you. Right. And good night from me.
Soaring prices, mass shortage.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think this is a great ending for this social event. Gareth, Vangelis, that was really great. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I think it's really tempting to go to Crete again. I can remember, I think I was in Crete about 25 years ago, and,
Oh, you
and I
must come back.
still very great memories on that. Great country, great people, and yeah, sure, we are sorry, but if I see this fun here, it is really tempting to go back to Crete again. And thanks a lot for all of your preparations, especially also from our Greek colleagues. This is very appreciated. It was a hassle, of course, unfortunately, but I think, as you said, maybe there are some good sides. Maybe we now understand even some language better. Maybe we understand even some technology better. So maybe there's some good sides on this, and then hope that we can come up with more good sides eventually in Greece. Let's think about that. Yeah, it was really great. Yeah, also the motivation, yeah, I like that. And then, as you said, culture is very important in some way. Maybe it's sometimes important more than technology in some way. Thanks a lot once again.
We need technology.
Okay, so thank you very much. And tomorrow we start at 11 set with a keynote on knowledge-defined network visualization when program data plane meets artificial intelligence.
I'm just going to say good night to my brother because I just saw he's online. Okay, good night, everyone.
Great. Yeah, have a good night and see you tomorrow. Great ending of this day. Yeah, see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Thank you a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Recording stopped.